my name is Risa, and I want to talk today about anima and animus in relationship. I want to preface by sort of outlining why my word is relevant at all, why you should listen to me, given that I'm not a Jungian analyst. So I can say that my standing in credentials are really the fact that I've had a very serious animus problem, and I've been in analytic work with an analyst for some time now and have a lot of direct experience working with the dream and spiraling into deeper layers of the unconscious myself. And having had a really negative mother complex, a negative father complex, which is a double whammy for these sort of nefarious and negative forces that constellate very early in the developing psyche, really playing out a lot of the great chaos and dramas of the unconscious material in external life. And that happened for me quite young. So the animus problem was really constellated through some pretty bizarre experiences with men, and how that reflected my relationship to my inner womanhood as well. And also my husband and I both had these very serious, prior to meeting each other, very serious negative anima and animus relationships respectively, where we were with people that were real strong reflective mirror images that constellated that inner warped relationship. And those relationships were very catastrophic, drama-filled, chaotic, devastating, and created the outcome of that was really a big destruction of psyche in a way that ended up being positively regenerative, as is often the case when we're going through these. If we traverse these difficult life experiences with a right attitude, with a will towards truth and an urge towards consciousness and wholeness, and my husband and I both have had that, whatever that inner substance is that makes one able to persevere and want to emerge through challenge. And after we had those relationships, we came together and we had a very strong meeting and connection together, and we've been together for 7 years, married for, how long have we been married? 3 or 4, something like that. It's all been a bit of a blur, honestly. We have a child together. And the anima animus problem is still alive and well, but it's much more of an inner, very connected and subtle process at this stage, as opposed to in the earlier phases where you're very unconscious of the nature of the problem, and therefore you get drawn into these so-called synchronistic, seemingly fated, destined meetings with people or situations, even circumstances in the outer world, which is what Jung said about the unconscious. Until you make the unconscious conscious, you project it outward and you call it fate or something, or it manifests around you, something of that nature. So yeah, I have a lot of experience with the whole subject matter, basically, and have been a very active participant in the deliberate work to transform that inner relationship. So from the outset, when we're talking about anima and animus, it is the inner contrasexual opposite. Now, something to bear in mind about archetypes is that, in Jung's words, they are the self-portrait of the instinct. So something that people seem to not always grasp about the archetypal substrate of the collective unconscious is that it's deeply interwoven with instinctual biology and physiology. So some people who call themselves, I don't know, neo-Jungians or post-Jungian thinkers, they get a little bit slippery with some of the gender stuff, which is kind of in vogue at the moment within our collective conversation. But this presents some issues where it ends up, from what I can see, being a way in which there's a projection of some kind of gender fluidity ideology onto the unconscious in a way that's just, it's not actually reflective of what the unconscious is saying. So in terms of making that more practical, if you're a woman, you don't have an anima problem, because that is your basic essence that rises out of your physiology. If you have issues as a woman with the feminine dimension of life, that is often a combination of things like a negative mother problem, where the imprint of the mother archetype has created some kind of aversion towards your own nature, and often it's entwined with the negative mother, a shadow problem. So when we talk about the shadow figures in the dream are same sex, right? So it's a part of you. So people want to say things like, well, you know, we get a bit more fluid these days, so, you know, you could be a woman and you might have more anima problems. It's not an anima problem, like technically, and the dreams don't constellate an image that says otherwise. They just don't. So it's always confusing to me when I hear Jungians that kind of get a bit slippery with this, because I go, well, it just doesn't seem to work that way in the dream. And I've discussed this at length with my analyst as well. And she says, yeah, it's kind of a big problem in the Jungian space somewhat. So you can have feminine issues as a woman, but it's not an anima problem, okay? Because that's not the contrasexual opposite. We have however many thousands, hundreds of thousands of years of biology and the evolution of the psychosomatic, instinctual interwovenness of this astral psychic material with our biology and physiology. So the same goes for a man. If you are a man, you don't have animus problems. You have a negative father problem or an impotency issue relating to a mother problem, and therefore you have, let's say, if you have a lot of dreams as a man of penetrative, very instinctual or very assertive or very organized masculine figures, those are shadow energies, and they could also be father images as well and things of this nature. So when it comes to relationships, we can start to gather data about our own anima animus problem through the kinds of people that we are attracted to or even fascinated by. It may not even necessarily be a sexual libido pull, but any sort of pull of that psychic energy, that activation of the libido, even if it is just fascination or intrigue as opposed to a sexual desire, that's still an indicator that that's what the unconscious psyche is projecting out. This is the thing about sexuality and libido. It's all woven into this unconscious psychic life and these lower elemental forces of the personality, of the deep psyche. So when we think about some of these mass cultural phenomenons like Twilight or 50 Shades of Grey, that's evocative of a shadowy, immature animus problem where you've got this hyper dark, dominating, you know, kind of abusory type of energies, or in the case of the vampire that sucks the life. I mean, the demon lover is a big theme with one of the animus, negative animus depictions, right? Sucks the life force, sucks the blood, drains the woman of her psychic vitality, feeds off of her own eros. I mean, these are common motifs that come up with the negative animus problem. So we see these mass level phenomenons that tend to express that. For a man, the early phases of the anima development are often first met through the biological or Eve aspect of the femininity, where it's the Playboy model poster up on the bedroom wall. It's very much about the physiology and that sort of pure biological urge. But as he evolves too, the woman evolves, he evolves, there are other qualities that come through. So it's said that a primitive woman, so to speak, and that could be a woman existing in the Western culture. I don't mean, let's say, a primitive tribe, but a primitive woman in terms of her psychological development will be very much more likely to be attracted to certain superficial qualities of masculine potency, something like the fitness athletic guy, the hot athlete, the tall dude, the muscly dude. Whereas later on it will be more in alignment with traits such as the consciousness that the man carries, or his certain cleverness or creative capacity or aptitude and things of this nature. So I'm going in a few different directions here, but in terms of the early gathering of data experience, which you can do, you look to where the energy gets drawn to naturally. What do you find yourself being attracted to or drawn to or fascinated by? And then the other piece is looking at the relational sphere, because it's not always the case, but perhaps certain temperaments and orientations of personality, people who are a bit more open or creative especially, tend to, let's say, play out some of these dramas with the projections of the anima and animus problem, which can lead to sometimes disasters in relationship. But even otherwise, you know, we could talk about a pretty vanilla married couple. There will still be anima and animus clashes there, because we can never see beyond what we haven't touched in ourselves. So if we're really unconscious as women with our interior masculine component and we're with our man, there may be an activation that happens where then there's that projection of that animus. And this is where the drama can happen, because we have to then work out, hold on, is what I'm saying about my man, and you know, for a man, we're talking about women, you just flip it around, is what I'm saying about my man in this instance, is that a true reflection of him in this moment, or am I seeing a certain pattern that's trying to show me something about my own psychic state? What can be challenging is that sometimes it's both. And as I said in the beginning, for my husband and I, we both had these very dramatic anima and animus relationships that really constellated the negative side of that image. There was both the projection, but we had picked people that reflected that projection, right? So that's the thing about how projection and synchronicity works in terms of how it's relating in our outer life. We can pick people that are really reflections of that projection. And so then, you know, but let's say you're married and the relationship is basically healthy and stable, but then you have these clashes, which all relationships do. There's likely anima and animus that go on. Now, in the earlier phases also of working out the contrasexual opposite, there is often the needing to detangle the animus and the anima from the father complex and the mother complex, because as these first imprints of the gender principles through the parents and through the ancestry, these are what end up informing the early informations of the anima and animus, even though they are different archetypally. You could have the father complex and the animus, they're different energies, or even the father image, the father archetype, and that can show up sometimes in the dreams as the wise old man or the wizard, and that's a little bit different from the animus. Typically the animus and the anima will show up in the dreams as a similarly aged individual, because if it's your contrasexual opposite, it is it's closer in age. It's meant to be that reflecting correspondent to you. So the wise old man or the father image or the God image are different. But nonetheless, back to the grassroots of it all, the father image can inform what the animus then looks like. So for myself, with a negative father complex, that creates a very strong impotency in consciousness. And the way a negative father complex for a man or a woman can show up is just this, I can't execute, I can't do, and can have nothing to do with your actual talent and ability. You could have someone with a negative father complex who has all the talents, who has all the skills, they have everything they need to do to go and execute their mission or whatever is the purpose that they're trying to drive towards. But something just gets in the way. There's just some really deep subconscious possession that really makes one believe that they can't do it. And I've experienced with this actually another synchronistic piece of it being in the early phases again, actually being thwarted by external circumstances. So I'd try and do something related to my creative work or something, and something would happen, a disaster would happen, someone would come and knock on the door in that moment, or the interference, right? And then that would reinforce this idea of, see, I just can't, everything's trying to prevent me from doing it. So even those sorts of synchronicities and things like that can occur, once again, when the energy is still, you haven't differentiated from it, it's still kind of a mystery to you, it's in the unconscious, therefore it sort of gets constellated. It's one of these great metaphysical mysteries about, you know, how substance works, quantum mechanics, I don't know, whatever. So what can show up in relationships first as well, it can be the negative father, not the negative father, but the father complex generally, or the mother complex. So let's say if the man has had an emotionally unavailable and unnurturing mother, that could show up as a pain in his relationship. If the wife does something, whether she's actually doing it or he's just projecting it on her, and he's got an oversensitivity in terms of how he's interpreting her actions, he may feel like, why don't you acknowledge me and what I'm trying to do? you don't nourish or support me, you don't back me with the things that I'm trying to do, you don't acknowledge what my efforts or my gifts or something like that. So we really do have to take a lot of responsibility for what we're seeing come up in ourselves and what we're potentially projecting or interacting with in the partner. And it is true that we can, even in a healthy relationship or a relationship, let's say, that has a love deeper than the projection, because sometimes we find that when we withdraw the anima animus projection from the other, then we go, oh, there's actually no real relationship here, and then you break up. But let's say you're in a relationship where there is a real love there that transcends the projections. We can still, even then, we can trigger each other, and we can play out each other's opposites in different ways. Sometimes we can unconsciously react and embody even what the other person is projecting sometimes. I mean, it's really quite a fascinating thing that can go on. But it requires a lot of honesty and intimate reflection as to our own, one, being honest enough to be able to track what you're experiencing in that moment. So if you're feeling agitated towards the boyfriend as the woman, okay, why am I agitated? What actually is the story right now? He's not doing the and so it can all, as a stepping stone, or as the solutions may go, I always invite for people to take responsibility and go, okay, that's what I'm seeing come from the boyfriend right now. How am I doing that relative to myself, for one? And once again, it doesn't mean that he's not doing it, because you have to work that out. But even if, let's say, he is being distant or not paying attention to you in some way, it's always a good idea to just reflect on, where am I still being distant from myself or not relating to myself in a deeper way? And when you can resolve that, at least to some degree, with yourself as a woman in this case, then even if the man is reflecting that, it becomes a very different invitation with the way you approach him as a woman. Because if you just go into unconscious reactivity, it can go into that emotional projection, which just can make him go, go away even more. And then it's just this tug of wars. Whereas if you can go as a woman into your own receptivity and say, hey, I really need more connection right now, or I'm feeling quite sad and lonely when I feel you pull away and do this. And it becomes a very different space. Now, if he's really immature, he could still react to that from his wounded boy and not want to listen to that, and then you have something constellated in him potentially, and then it's a matter of, is he going to take responsibility for it and work through, or is it, does it have to go away or something? But if the inner man is really committed to the love principle in his relationship with the woman, then something about the woman's pain does draw him in, where he opens through his own limitation in consciousness and can show up there. So there's a lot of beautiful different movements that we can make together, and it really crafts what can become a very real, very human, and very mutually sustainable and nurturing, I think I just said that, self-promoting, and I mean self in the Jungian sense now with a capital S. Is that the way? Yeah. The deeper inner soul of the person. And when you can actually relate to each other in this way, where you have this mission together with this orientation towards honesty, it can really allow for this fertile ground for the real individuals to emerge. And that has been my consistent experience with my own husband, where we've been through so many phases in our relationship. Our relationship looks so different now than what it was at the beginning. We as people are so completely different. I can really say that this is how, from my standpoint, how human beings, certainly the man and woman relationship, is meant to operate together. We're meant to allow each other to flourish and open more, and it does require really deep commitment to love. It requires that marriage vow, whether that's taken literally or it's more of an inner, it's always an inner movement. And certainly people can get married on the surface without actually having made the spiritual commitment. right? But it does require that willingness to stay put through the challenges. A lot of people come through clashes with their significant other when one person wants to transform and the other one doesn't. And these can be these points where we have to go, okay, if I'm willing to go that extra mile and the other person isn't, then I have to be willing to, and usually it will be an anima animus projection at this stage, where you may think that this person is the one you're meant to be with, but then how can it be if one of you is ready to do what it takes to become real and the other one isn't? Then that's just not the person. And where we get these things of, oh, but I can change him. Now, these are almost comical memes at this point in the collective, right? And for the man, it's a little bit different. It's something like, well, I can save her. I can save that chaotic, crazy woman. Or I can change the man. This is anima animus classically, just quintessentially. Women, it's not about changing him. It's about evolving your animus problem. And that's why when you, to the degree that you continue to project it on that man, you see this with some of these big celebrity relationships. I mean, it's a human problem, right? So they happen across the board. But I was doing a bit of deep diving into the Megan Fox and what's his name, the Machine Gun Kelly relationship. And I thought, man, this is a real adolescent anima animus relationship here that's going on. And you could totally feel that from her too, of this, you know, wanting to change him or seeing his creative potential, but she was seeing herself. And so then, you know, there's just been the break in the relationship time and time again. But it's the same thing, right? We have to withdraw the projection and start to not see the person through the lens of our own projection. And by the way, that's not even love, right, in the first place. Certainly, it's not love to not be able to see someone as they are, even if it means if seeing them as they are is acknowledging their shortcomings. You know, it might be, you might think, well, shouldn't we want to build the person up? But no, you should always, it's endeavoring to see the truth of someone in their shortcomings and in their potentials. But if someone is going to continue identifying with their shortcomings and you're willing to go deeper, then there has to be that break. And this can be the tricky thing for people to make. And it's often very sticky and hard to leave when there is such a psychic projection, because that thrusting of the libido onto that person and that enmeshment that happens, it creates all of this yearning and the desire as well. There can be the strong sexuality in it, and there's all of this, it's that conjunctio thing of the Aphrodite, of wanting to unify with that person. But again, what you're really wanting to unify with is your inner opposite, or the truth of who you are. And it serves no one in the long run to continue making that projection over and over and over again. You've got to pull it back. So maybe a little bit of a scattered video today. My apologies. I hope you've followed along and that it was interesting somewhat or useful somewhat. But maybe to tie it all together, you know, we play out the contrasexual opposites often in relationship. Even if you've got a stable and healthy relationship in the earlier phases of a marriage, for instance, you're going to have those interplays of the other forces. And it matters to be honest about the nature of those conflicts and to stay with them. The amount of divorces or separatings that happen just because people do not have the tools or the consciousness to understand what's going on and to really get to the bottom of an issue. It's a travesty, really, because we are meant to relate to each other and we are meant to help each other become whole through a real love for one another. That's how human beings are designed. Don't buy into all this bullshit right now with the man and woman, the clash of the genders, okay? This is nothing but an adolescent, fragmented, narcissistic, egocentric immaturity where it's just hurt people, and we've got the projections and the anima animus crossing swords at a mass scale. And it's just, if you buy into it for a second, you're not only condemning an entire half of the species, but you are castrating yourself psychologically. Just, you are preventing so much potential growth, healing, and wisdom through buying into that for even a second. I find the whole sphere very upsetting for myself personally, especially when I think about how rewarding and nourishing, and how much my relationship with my husband has been one of self-emergence, this deep cultivation of appreciation, of respect, of seeing these evolving phases of love where we come together and it's a deeper union, and then we kind of individuate a little bit and we come together, and all of this misinformation that people have about how, you know, what's possible, I guess, and what it really means to truly love another person. But maturing and discovering who you are really, and becoming a competent person able to self-actualize and individuate in the really true Jungian sense of the word, is really a matter of first taking that responsibility of seeing the projections. If you're just going, all men are like this, all women are like this, and the thing is, if you are very unconscious, then you will consistently pick men or women from that unconscious place of projection that reflect that, or perhaps even more unfortunately, you'll have someone that doesn't reflect that at all, but you're so blind in your separation from yourself that you project it onto them, and then don't give them a chance to really be seen either, and that's very sad. So in terms of the practicals of it, 1, becoming curious, 2, taking inventory. What kinds of men, women, fantastical figures even, again, doesn't just have to be sexual. I mean, I loved Doctor Who as a kid, and so you've got this very mercurial, mad genius quality that comes with the Doctor Who character, right? So it's like, okay, what's that telling me about something to do with my own particular animus quality there, right? So you can start taking the inventory of the opposite and go, what pulls you in? And for a man, it could even be it could be older women as well, which is not necessarily part of the anima, but it still can bring in information about the potential mother complex, or something like that, both in what you crave and also what you're averse to. I really hate men that are like this. You know, we're to the point where you've got, because there's lots of behavior that we can say that's really condemnable and awful, but if you're really, I really get upset when this kind of person does this. You got to catch that and go, okay, that's telling me something about something going on inside of me. Doesn't necessarily mean that you are like that person, but let's say if it's a woman and this kind of man gets you really going, that can be telling you something about a way in which your own animus is, you know, messing with you in the back somewhere in a way that's unconscious to you. And the same goes for a man as well. So we take accountability for that by doing that investigative process. Take pen to paper, you write it down, you think about relationships and the relational history, think about what kind of images you're attracted to, you're averse to. And that's a good starting point to really start to map these things out, and just to really acknowledge how you can think you've done a bit of work with this, and maybe you have, but then when you come into a real relationship, if you go, actually, I want to know what a real love with a person is, and I really want to come into what it really means to unify with another person, then if you move with that orientation, you know, that's going to invite in you all of that which is going on, which is not in unity or is not in a balance or wholeness. So the urge towards truth, in other words, will necessarily activate all of that which is deceptive in you, or at least part of the delusion that's going on, where you think that they're doing this, and that's because you can't see the other person properly, and you know, you got what's reality versus what's your projection, right? So that's about maturity of orientation, and to drop whatever narrative that's so being reinforced in this collective at this stage of just this bullshit about men are like this and women are like this, and therefore, you know, fuck you to the other person. It is childish. Okay, so this was a little bit more of a general discussion. There's really so many more things that could be said about it, because there's so many different angles to it, but I think that is decent enough as an introduction, or just these were just the thoughts that were going through my mind today. So I hope you enjoyed. Give the video a like if you found it interesting, and hopefully I'll see you soon. All right, thanks.